So basically, today's webinar is actually an opinion. Okay. So basically, I'm going to tell you the language that every developer must know. Okay. So that is the first slide itself says that this is just a opinion from my side. I'm not trying to prove anything. Okay. So let's begin. Now, before I tell you my verdict, I would like to know from you that what you guys think is the program or the language that you all should know. Okay. So I have created a poll for this. These are all the languages that you can see. I've created a poll. I will just share this link, and everybody is requested to give your response. Just click on the link and give your response. Type it again. Okay, I've sent the link again.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have a clear verdict here. Everybody is going for Python, I guess, right? So obviously, Python is the current trend of developing the programs. But let us see what I think that should be the program. Okay, so let us find what is my opinion. So this is the symbol of the language that I am going to speak about. Okay, and if anybody has guessed it, this is nothing but JavaScript. Okay, now most of you must be thinking this, what, right? How is it possible that JavaScript can be the best language that everybody should learn, right? So the reason is because of these. Okay, so first of all, if you learn this language JavaScript, obviously you can create web applications, you can also create mobile applications, you can create desktop applications as well, and the best part is you can also create server applications. Okay, and that doesn't end over there. You can also create many more use cases. There are many more use cases that I will show you at the end of the presentation. So because of these things, I personally believe that JavaScript is the language that everybody should learn. Okay, that doesn't mean you should not learn other languages, but this should be the minimum everybody should know, right? The reason is you learn one language and you can use it to make apps in any of these platforms, right? So let's see what uh, a survey in 2019 say, right? So this is a professional survey taken. If anybody is a programmer out here, most of you must be knowing what is Stack Overflow. Okay, so they have conducted a survey in 2019, and according to them, 67% say JavaScript is the framework, is the language that everybody should know, right? And then there is HTML, CSS, SQL, Python, etc., etc., right? So if you want to look at the other surveys that they have done, you can just open this link and check it out. I will be sharing this presentation at the end, so you can you refer it back then. Okay. So let us see now what is JavaScript. Now JavaScript is a scripting language to implement complex features on web pages. Okay, so this was the primary objective when JavaScript was invented. Okay, so basically for understanding what JavaScript is, we will begin with who created it, right? So the person behind creating JavaScript is Braden H, right? So he's also called the father of JavaScript. Now it is very interesting to understand what is the evolution of JavaScript, why JavaScript was invented. Okay. So before, if you, I don't know how many of you know, the first browser that was invented was World Wide Web. Okay. So this is the browser's name, but it was not that popular. But then a commercial popular browser came that was called Mosaic. Okay. And uh, the team who developed Mosaic, then they split it out and they created something called as Netscape. Okay. And which is right now Mozilla. Okay. So the Netscape people, they thought at that time that only HTML and CSS was giving you only static websites. So you wanted something which would produce, dynamic websites at the client side. So you needed some light language which could be used in the client side. Okay. So that at that time, whatever languages we had that were used in the server side. Okay. So once the code comes to your client, then there was no option for any programming over there. So that is when this person, that is the Brendan Each, was appointed by Netscape, and they invented this JavaScript, and it was not invented directly. The first name given to this programming language was called Mocha. Okay, so it was first named this. Then for popularity, they named it LiveScript. And after that, they teamed up with Sun. You must be knowing who Sun is, right? Sun was actually the people who produced Java. So they teamed up with Java, Sun Systems, and they gave they renamed this language, that is the name that we have, that is JavaScript. Okay, so that is the evolution of JavaScript. But then over the years, everybody started implementing JavaScript, but in a different way, right? So Microsoft started implementing their own JavaScript. They called it JScript. Okay. Then there was something called a SkyMonkey. So all these standards, they were not following any standards. So what happened was, if you run a program made in JavaScript at that time, that would not run in JScript in Internet Explorer, right? So that compatibility issue was there. So what the people at Netscape did is they approached someone called as ECMA. Okay, so ECMA is European Computer Manufacturers Association. They helped in standardizing JavaScript. Okay, so these are the people who actually standardize JavaScript so that the various browsers will all be compatible with each other. So wherever you run your code, JavaScript code, it will run in all the browsers. Okay, so you can see all the different versions that they have released over the years. So the current version that we are working on is ECMAScript 2018. Okay, so now that was the history of JavaScript. Now let us see what all things you should learn to understand JavaScript. Okay, now there are a lot of things, but these are the few things that I have listed out that everybody should learn. That are variables and operators, conditions and loops, functions, events, objects, and the most important part for which JavaScript was invented is DOM manipulation. Okay, DOM manipulation means your HTML, your content manipulation of that. Okay, so for that I have given you two resources. There are many resources online. I like these two personally the best. Okay, so first one is text-based tutorials point, and the second one is a complete course on YouTube, which is free of cost. Okay. So now let's see. Now we have seen what is JavaScript. It's also called as vanilla JavaScript. Okay, vanilla being pure, right? So it's pure JavaScript, and now we will talk about frameworks. Okay. So now basically, what is a framework? Now framework is very important to understand for any language. Now any programming language you take, you will always find a framework for that, right? Now people will say, is that framework required? Is it required, or why should I use framework, right? So basically, I will give you a few examples to make you understand why frameworks are important, right? Let's suppose you want to make a coffee, right? So you normally what you do is you put some sugar, you put some water, sugar, maybe coffee powder, then milk powder, etc., and you make it, right? And every time you make it, there will be the ratios will not be always the same, right? So every time you make your coffee, some different kind of a variation will be there in the taste, right? So that is called vanilla JavaScript, right? So here, every time you make, you are doing the things again and again. What about framework, right? So let's suppose you one day you decide that no, I will make a ready mix in my home with the uh, ratios of all the powders in my way, right? So I have selected 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of this. So all this, I have created a ready mixture. And this, what it does is whenever you want to make now coffee, you just have to put this 1 teaspoon and your coffee is ready. And every time you make, you get the perfect coffee, right? So that is where the frameworks comes into picture. So somebody has done the research and made has removed all the security vulnerabilities in the framework so that you can concentrate on your project rather than security, right? The second example that I'm going to tell you about is another advantage of using framework is, let's suppose you are alone in home and you have just washed your clothes and now you want to stack it up in your cupboard, right? So if you're alone, obviously what you will do is you just take everything and dump it inside your cupboard, right? And next time when you want to take a t-shirt out, then you have to search the entire cupboard to get the t-shirt, right? Now that is vanilla JavaScript, right? So now let's see how framework helps here, right? So now let's suppose your parents are there in your house, right? So when you try to put inside your cupboard everything jumbled up, they will not allow you to do it, right? So they will say you have to separate your t-shirts separately, you have to separate your pants, you have to separate everything separately, right? So then when you place it inside each rack, then next time when you want to fetch a t-shirt, it is very easy, right? So that is the advantage of using frameworks. So frameworks does this, okay? So actual use case of this is, if you ever see the source code of our CMSIS portal, there are around 800 pages, or basically it is made in pure PHP, right? So there are 800 pages and each page does a different function, right? Now, whenever there is any problem in any of the things, then first thing I have to do is I have to search those 800 pages where that problem is, right? So it is a very tedious task. Now, if I would have used, if I would have used a framework, then of each of the jobs will be done by us in a separate folder. It will be properly organized, right? So that is the advantage of framework, right? So currently, right now, I'm working on the new version of CMSIS, which will be using frameworks. Okay. So one last use case that I would like to share with you is an actual incident with me. So in the beginning years, when I created an open source software, I published it online. And what happened was, since it was an open source software, it was around 10 years back, right? So it was, I have just started learning PHP at that time. So what happened was, it was some people, maybe it must be an hacker or something. They found a vulnerability in my code, and what they did was they uploaded a, a zip file onto my software. And the problem was, the vulnerability in my code was, I forgot to add a validation. Okay. So what I have done is, when the user uploads a profile pic, instead of validating, I just uploaded it directly. Okay. So what happened was, the hacker uploaded the zip file, extracted it, and then guess what was there inside that zip file? There was a website which was hosted on my website, which was stealing credit card information, right? And I was obviously I was not aware of this, and immediately I got a mail from cyber hosting department that your hosting will be terminated if you do not remove this page, right? So I immediately found out what was the problem, and obviously I resolved it. But then this security vulnerability shows you that what is the need of use of frameworks, right? So what frameworks does is all the security that you need to implement, they have already implemented it. So you don't have to worry about implementing security. You just have to worry about implementing your task or your project. Okay. So basically this is just what I have said. Okay. So basically it helps in uh, frameworks for about sorry, it frameworks are about efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, so you can read through this later. So next, before we go ahead with the different frameworks that I would like to share, I would like to have another poll. This is the last poll that we are going to have. So I would like to know which of these frameworks have you heard about. Okay. So these are some of the frameworks: jQuery, React.js, AngularJS, Angular, Vue.js, Ember, Meteor, Polymer, Backbone. So I just want to see how many of you have heard any of these. So I think, so everybody has heard jQuery, right? And I think jQuery wins over here. Okay. So let's, like, I think that is enough. So we have a clear verdict that it is jQuery, React, and Angular, right? So let's see what are the popular JavaScript frameworks, right? So I've already got a basic idea from you guys that what all you know. Let's see what are the frameworks, right? So the first framework that I would like to show you is jQuery. Okay, so this is the uh, you know, the go-to framework. This was the main framework that has been there from long years, right? So uh, this is the framework that we all have to learn, and they are the people who have made DOM manipulation. Previously, DOM manipulation in JavaScript was very difficult, and jQuery made it very easy. Okay, right now in the latest versions of JavaScript, it is equally easier in uh, pure JavaScript also, but still understanding jQuery is very important. So what it helps is it helps to make the foundation better, right? Next, we will go to the three most famous frameworks. Okay, somehow the Vue.js logo is not coming. So the three most famous frameworks are React.js, Angular, and Vue.js. Okay, so Angular has two versions, AngularJS and Angular. So AngularJS was the older version. So now these three versions, out of these three, the React.js is the what you say most popular framework right now. Okay, so everybody is going towards React.js. Okay, so in fact in the later in the evening we also are having a session on React.js especially, right? And so I'm not going to talk about that much. The other two frameworks, Angular and Vue.js, these are the frameworks that I personally like. Now, what you like will be it's a personal opinion, right? So actually, I started with Angular, and I liked Angular JS a lot, but then they released Angular and they used something called as TypeScript in it, and I found it a little difficult to understand. So that's why then I was searching for a new framework and I found Vue.js. Vue.js is very user friendly and I like it personally the best, and it can be expanded it has lots of features like reactivity and store management, security management, there is it has a Vue CLI, so we can use it is Vue.js. Okay, so now this entire presentation, I will show you the survey what the same website that Stack Overflow has done. Again, jQuery wins over here, then followed by React.js, followed by Angular. Okay. The point to note over here is the top 3 frameworks that we are seeing over here is all of JavaScript. Okay. So that's why that is the reason of this entire presentation. Okay. Now, these are some other frameworks that you can learn based on your needs, but I would suggest to learn any one of the previous frameworks. This I have just included so that you know there are lots of frameworks available. Then next, let us keep aside the web frameworks. Now let's go to cross-platform mobile apps. Okay. Now, the important thing to understand over here is once you learn any one of those frameworks, either React or you learn Angular or Vue.js, then you can use it to make web apps as well as mobile apps as well as desktop apps. I will show you how. Okay, so first let us see how to handle mobile apps. Now, cross-platform mobile apps can be done with the help of these 4 tools. The first one is called React Native. Then there is Cordova, PhoneGap, and Ionic. Now the last 3, Cordova, PhoneGap, and Ionic, they all depend on some way or the other on Cordova, right? So basically the main framework here is these 2, that is React Native and Cordova. Okay, so I will now show you what are the differences between these frameworks. I don't know if you can see.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see which I have included Flutter also over here. Flutter is another framework developed by Google, but it is not JavaScript. Okay, but just for comparison, I have added it. Okay, so the creators I have mentioned, React Native, it is actually developed by Facebook. Then Ionic, Drifty, and Flutter by Google, and PhoneGap by Adobe. Okay, so now here you can see the programming language that it uses. Okay, React Native uses JavaScript, Ionic uses JavaScript, and PhoneGap uses JavaScript, whereas Flutter uses a new language called Dart. Okay, so now again, because if you already know JavaScript, then creating mobile apps in any of these 3 will be very easy, right? Because you already know the language behind it, right? Then you can see the performance, right? Now, if you look at the another survey, you will find that most of the people use React Native to make the mobile apps nowadays. Okay. Now you may ask why React Native or why these cross-platform, what is known as cross-platform. Okay. Now, usually in previous days when this technology was not there, that means that React Native, PhoneGap was not there, then companies had to employ different developers for different operating systems. Like for Android, we will be having a different different developer. For iOS, a different developer, like that, right? So once these technologies came in, then you just have to write the code once and export it to all the other operating systems. So that is called as cross-platform mobile apps. So then the problem was of performance, right? Because these technologies, they use the browser's framework. That means the Chrome engine to show the contents to the user, right? So in the end, the performance will have a little problem when you deal with cross-platform apps, right? But in that, you will see that React Native is very close to the native languages, right? Like for example, if you're building Android, you have to use Java, and if you're using for Mac, you have to use Swift programming language, right? So that when you create apps using React Native, it is close to the performance is very good, right? That's why most of the people are using nowadays React Native. Okay, so rest of the things you can just go through. right? I have just added the things. Now, let me show you some of the apps that are created using React Native. You must already be familiar with these apps, right? It must be there on your phones also, right? Like for example, Facebook app is created using React Native. Instagram, Airbnb, Walmart, Tesla, Uber Eats, all these pages, these are only some of the apps that I've included. There are many more apps. So I just wanted to show you that very famous apps are also made using React Native. So once you learn JavaScript, uh, um, you have the opportunity to make web mobile apps in for like these popular apps. Okay. Next, before we close this part of mobile apps, I will also like to show you what is progressive web apps. Okay. Now, progressive web apps are nothing but apps which, let's suppose you don't want to create a separate mobile app, but you want the offline features of the apps in your of the app in your web page also. Then you can create something called as progressive web apps. Okay. So I will show you one example. If you just click on this dot I have added, okay, so that opens a new page. And if I just come out of the full screen, you can see you must all be knowing this website. It is called OLX. Okay. And in any website, if you see this dot over here, can you see this plus sign? So this dot tells you that this is a progressive web app. Okay. So all you have to do is just click on install and click install, right? Now what happens is this now becomes an app in your PC. Okay. So now if I just show you, can you see this? So now it is like an app on your computer, right? So this is what it helps in. What it does is it creates it installs the entire app on your local storage, that is on your computer. Okay, so you can use these frameworks for this, and my personal favorite is framework 7. Okay, so you can try this. This is a very good framework and it helps you a lot while developing the progressive web apps, also mobile apps. Okay, then there is Polymer and React PWA, all these frameworks you can use. Okay, let's now shift our focus to, we have seen how to create web apps. We have seen how to create mobile apps. Now let us see which platform to use to create desktop apps. Okay, so desktop apps, if any of you is familiar with this icon, then you know this is for Electron.js. It is a very famous uh, uh, tool used to create cross-platform desktop apps. Again, now cross-platform means you write the code once in the JavaScript, and then you can export it to Windows, you can export it to Linux, you can export it to Mac, etc., etc., right? So these features is given to you by Electron.js, right? So again, here you're using JavaScript, HTML and CSS, and you can create any apps. Okay. Now I will show you some of the apps that are made using Electron.js. Now I don't know how many of you are familiar with this window. If you have ever used, if you have ever done programming in this editor, then you all know what this is, right? So can anyone reply what this editor is known as? Perfect, perfect. It is Visual Studio Code, right? So this is just an example of how popular products made using Electron.js are, right? So you just use JavaScript and you can make such wonderful apps which we all use for programming, right? Let's see some other apps. Anybody, any idea which app this is? Perfect, perfect. It is Slack. Okay. It is Slack. Okay. Now, for all the developers out there, you should be familiar with what Slack is, right? So Slack is basically it's a messaging service for the programmers, right? So you can it is very important for final year students. Whenever they are working on a project, they should use Slack for communication and other things, right? Next, let us see what this is. Everybody knows, even non-programmers will know what this is, right? Yeah, exactly. This is Skype, okay? So everybody knows this. Now I want to know this next one. How many of you know what this is? Perfect, perfect. So this shows how much people are into gaming, right? So Discord is gaming communication. Basically, you can do voice chatting using Discord. It's very famous among gamers. Okay, so this is again made using Electron.js. So we have seen a lot of apps. We have seen web apps. We have seen uh, mobile apps. We have seen desktop apps. Let's now shift our focus to something called as server apps. Okay. Now, initially when JavaScript was made, it was made as a client-side scripting language. Okay. Now, what do you mean by client-side scripting language is this, whatever code you write using JavaScript, it will run only in your browser. It doesn't run in your server. Okay. So the server sends the code to your browser and it is run on your browser, right? But then after the various versions of JavaScript that was released, that is with the help of ECMA, so people found out the potential of JavaScript, and they then one of the uh, inventors, they came up with an idea of Node.js. Okay, now this was a revolution uh, for JavaScript, right? Now what Node.js is, now I don't think there will be any developer out there who has not used NPM, okay, Node Package Manager, right? They may not be using it for JavaScript, but they may be using it for some other things, but NPM is used by every developer everywhere, right? But uh, that NPM is made using Node, okay? Now let us see who created Node. Okay, so Node.js was created by Ryan in the year 2009. Okay, that means it is around, it is a fairly new framework as compared to JavaScript, which has been there for around 30 years, right? So it is comparatively a new framework, and this framework is made using something called as V8. Okay, now if you are aware of what V8 is, it's a Chrome real-time engine which Chrome has developed uh, it's a JavaScript engine, right? So Node.js works on top of that. Okay, so what is Node.js? Okay, so basically it is very important to understand what Node.js is. Okay, so Node.js, as its definition says, it's an open source. That is very important. It is open source. Whatever we have discussed till now, everything is open source and free of cost, right? So that is very important, so that you are not, there are other frameworks also like Extend.js, Sencha. All these frameworks I have not mentioned because they are also popular, but they are not open source, right? They are not free. You have to buy a license for that. So that's why I have mentioned only those frameworks which are open source, right? So the first thing that we're going to see is Node.js. Node.js is again an open source. Second, cross-platform runtime environment, right? Now that is very important. Cross-platform. Cross-platform means it will run on any all the different types of operating systems, whether you have Windows, whether you have Mac or Linux, it will work on everything, right? And the best part is it is used for server side applications. That means JavaScript, which was actually an a language which was used for client side scripting, now can be used for server side scripting with the help of Node.js. And that was the power of Node.js. Okay. Now then you may say that why should I go for Node.js? There are already there is Python available, there is PHP, there is Java, all these things are there. Then why should I go for Node.js? That is because of these 3 points. Okay. First one, It is asynchronous and event driven. Okay. Now this is the most important feature because of which Node.js is very famous. Okay. If you take a survey, if you look at the same website, Stack Overflow, you will find Node.js is the topmost framework, right? I will show you that survey in a while. Okay. Now what does asynchronous and event driven means?
When you
Okay.
see videos like this, people on planes wearing masks and full body protection, taking the temperature of passengers.
Done. Okay. So what does asynchronous and event driven mean? Okay. So normally when we create an app using any
Isn't it
other
for sharing on Twitter and
language,
Enter, and both have millions?
sorry. Okay. So normally when we make an application using this, any other language, what happens is when we send a request from the client side, the client will wait till that request is processed. Let's say, for example, you are going to do a database query, right? And you will have to wait till that query is finished, and then that response comes back to you, and then that is shown on your screen, right? But when it says asynchronous and event driven, this completely changes everything. Okay. What happens is when the client wants to get some data from the server, the client sends the data, the server has a queue in it, right? And that queue, the client, what it will do is it will send the request and forget about it. Okay. He will not wait for the response, right? So basically this is called asynchronous. Asynchronous means the previous method that we see, that was synchronous, where we send the request, then wait for the request to finish. Till that you cannot do anything, right? But in asynchronous, you send the request, then you can do whatever you want. And when the response is ready, the server will tell you that the response is ready. At that time you can process the request. Okay. So in that way, what happens is this entire thing can handle a lot of connections simultaneously. Okay. Now this makes this framework the fastest out there, right? So this is very important to understand, that if you are using some other language which is not asynchronous, what happens is uh, it's not, is the net not working?
So it's fine. There's a lag in your video.
Okay. So where was I? Okay, so it is very fast. Okay, why it is very fast is because it is not processing one request at a time. It is processing multiple requests, and it is not telling you to wait for the request. Okay, so you can do your task simultaneously, and what happens is the Node.js server that is running on the other side, it will do all the things, and when the time is ready, it will send an event to you telling that your response is ready, you can take the response. Okay, so because of this, what happens is the websites made using Node.js is very fast. Okay, particularly it is very important when you have websites which are where users can be in a huge number. Okay, like for example, I will show you all the different websites that use Node.js as the backend. Okay. Second, the third thing is it is single threaded. Okay. Now single threaded is a processor term. All those who are familiar with it, they must be knowing. So single threaded means normally an application, any program, it will, whenever a request comes, the program, what it does, it sends it to a thread, and that processes that thread will handle everything, right? So what happens is in other languages, when the multiple requests come, they send each request to a different thread. Okay. So in case of Node.js, that is not the case. Okay. In Node.js, what happens is it uses only single thread, and it uses something called as queue system. Okay. So as soon as the client request come, it goes into the queue, and then all the other requests are inserted inside the queue, and one by one the things are processed. Okay, using the single thread. Okay, now you may think, what if one of the requests requires a lot of computing time. It will take a lot of resources, right? So that, yes, that is a problem in Node.js. If let's suppose you have a face recognition going on, and that if you do, and let's say your system requires a lot of time to do face recognition, then your system using Node.js will hang because it is using single thread, right? It will not hang for the other users, it will hang because the queue is getting stuck, right? So that is the problem with Node.js. So how we can overcome that? We can make the request as small as possible, right? So these things are used for that purposes only. I will show you which all, what is the real application of this Node.js. Okay, so Node.js is actually used for real-time web applications. Okay, now whenever you want to make an app for, let's say, a chat app, okay, so that is where you will have to use Node.js. Okay, the reason is, if the chat, the number of people chatting at the time grows, what happens is it creates a lot of burden on the server. Okay, so this can be, this type of server, this type of applications can be easily handled by Node.js. Okay, I will show you one demo after this slide. Okay, so let us see what are the frameworks. Now again, Node.js is again a language. So again, it will be having a lot of frameworks. So I have listed a few of them. So these are all the frameworks that are there just for Node.js. Okay, so the previous frameworks that we have seen, that was for JavaScript. Okay, and Node.js is made on top of JavaScript, and Node.js also has frameworks. Okay, so the most famous and the most popular framework right now is Express.js. Okay, so anybody who has used Node.js must have even started with Express.js because it is the industry standard right now. Okay, then anyone who is interested in making real-time applications should also study Socket.io. Okay, this is a very good framework for real-time applications. And finally, if anybody, these two others are there, but these two I have specially highlighted because of a reason. The last one, that is Adonis.js. Okay, so anybody, if they are familiar with Laravel in the PHP world, they would like this framework. Okay, this framework is exactly like Laravel. Okay, but it is for Node.js. Okay, and finally, STR API. Okay, Strapi basically. Now this is a slightly different framework which uses Node.js, but you don't have to code anything. Okay, that is the best part. Let's suppose you want to make a mobile app and you don't want to work on Node.js at all, then you can use this framework to create your API for the backend, and in the front end you can use any platform like Angular or React or Vue or simple JavaScript also. Okay, so Strapi is very good at that. Okay, if you don't want to work on Node.js at all. Okay, so next, this is the most important part, why Node.js became very famous. Okay, the reason why Node.js became famous is because of NPM. Okay, and NPM stands for Node Package Manager. Now what this package manager does is, it previously, whenever you want to install any software, you have to download it from the website and install it at the proper location, otherwise it will not work, right? But after the release of Node, this package manager was available, and what this does is, you just have to run this command, npm space install and the name of the package. Okay, whatever package you want, right? I have installed here Express and Socket.io. I have installed two frameworks. So like this, you can install anything. with the help of package manager. So you don't have to worry to get the code from somewhere and install it on your system. NPM does it for you, right? Second thing, that is package installation. Second thing it does is, now once you downloaded the software, the programmer that created that software, let's say for example Express, now the Express once created, it doesn't stay there. It is continuously getting updated. Okay, even in your mobile phones, your OS gets updated every 3 or 4 months, right? So you don't have to actually go to the vendor and burn the OS again. It automatically updates, right? So that also is handled by NPM package manager. So you just have to do NPM update and it updates all the packages. Okay. Second thing is third thing is dependency management. This is the another feature which is very important. Okay. Let's suppose, let's say I installed Express.js, and Express.js in turn uses some other component, let's say socket.io. Okay. So if I just remove this, if I don't use this, and if I only install npm install express, I put this inside my command line. What happens is npm obviously installs express, but it also check what all things it needs to run, right? So it will find that socket.io is also one of the requirements. So what it does is it also installs socket.io, right? So that is called as dependency. So these are some of the websites that use Node.js, right? And you can see all of them are very famous and very popular websites. And before I go ahead with finish with this JavaScript, I would like to mention Dino.js. Dino.js is the new contender to Node.js, which is also made by the same developer, Rand Lalf. And this is much more secure than Node.js. That does not mean you have to replace it with Dino, but this is just for your information that Dino is out there. It also uses JavaScript. Okay. Now it is just a question mark. I just had this thing picture abhi baki hai. So let me that finishes with all the other things. I will just show you some more applications of JavaScript. Okay, it can be used for game engines. You can create games using JavaScript. You can see all these frameworks. You can also do animation using JavaScript. These are all the frameworks that are there. I will share the slides so you don't have to worry about it. And finally, we can also make presentations using these JavaScript, right? And if you look at the presentation right now, this is the presentation. Okay, and this presentation is made using Reveal.js. Okay, it's a web framework. You can open this link. I will put this link on the chat box to check out if you want to check out the presentation. So you can see, you can create wonderful presentations using Reveal.js. You can, okay, I would suggest you should all learn JavaScript. Then followed by, I would suggest also to learn jQuery if possible. And you have to learn one framework out of these, either React or Angular or Vue. Okay, that is my personal suggestion. And finally, you have to learn Node.js. Okay, so at least these things must be your target in this lockdown, so that I know many of you are working on different platforms, different languages, but I would suggest you to learn this language at least. Okay, you may learn others also, but this will be very helpful to you in making. I've shown you all the applications of this. Okay, so I finish my presentation, and right now, since I have finished my PPT, I am like this, right? And some of you may be like this, thinking I have seen a lot, and some of you may be like this, whatever, how much ever you got, I think you will extend your knowledge further. I've just given you what are the frameworks that you can learn. Now the learning part has to be done from your side only. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the session. Then there is another question, is it easy to switch within frameworks? I think no, it is very difficult because every framework has their own standards. So every framework has their own functions to call, so it is very difficult. What are your opinion on Django? Thank you, sir, for, okay. And thank you, Junaid, sir. Then if there are loopholes in framework itself, how to deal with such situations? Okay, so that is a very good question. If there are loopholes, then obviously that's why you go for a framework which is well established. That's why I have suggested those three frameworks. Okay, so all the frameworks that are new frameworks, definitely there will be some loopholes in it, right? So it is better to go for frameworks which are well established. Do you need to learn Angular to use Ionic? Yes, because Ionic depends on Angular, but it is not necessary. It gives you the feature of Angular inbuilt, but it is not necessary to use Angular. You can use pure JavaScript. Okay. How to deal with loopholes? Actually, because all these programs are open source, you can actually find the loopholes yourself and submit a push request to the developer. And if it solves the query, then he may accommodate that. Okay. It is very difficult to use Vue for creating native app because Vue is itself a client-side scripting language, so it is very difficult. So for that, you have to use tools which are specially meant for creating native apps, like React Native. Not JavaScript, everything is vulnerable to XXS. Okay, so if it's the programmer's fault. If XSS happens, then that is the programmer's fault. You have to see to it, you sanitize your code before uploading it onto your server. Okay, so XSS can be easily avoided. And for that, you have to use frameworks like Laravel has an inbuilt XSS avoidance system. Okay, thank you, everyone.